Tonight on Business Live, high inflation rate forces Bank of Ghana to increase policy rate by more than 1% to 29.5%. We'll hear from Governor Dr. Ennis Addison.
PC decided to increase the monetary policy rate by 150 basis points to 29.5%.
Ahead, we'll engage the Association of Ghana Industries as lending rates are expected to go up following the hike in the monetary policy rate. Now, mining firms Anglo Gold and Anglo Gold Ashanti rule out job cuts despite plans to merge the Takwa and Eduaprim mines.
In cutting costs as it has to do with employment, there are signages that bring the two, what is essentially all bodies together, and to be able to mine it efficiently. So that is what delivers the value, not so much in job cuts. So we don't see.
We have details of these and many others coming your way in a moment. Please stay. Grateful you could stay with us. I am Pious Kojo Backah, and those were your latest commodities updates. Straight to our very first story. The Mineral Income Investment Fund and the Ghana Stock Exchange have begun steps to get gold back listed on the local bears. The following report has more.
The move by the Ghana Stock Exchange and the Minerals Income and Investment Fund will establish a practical framework for the development of stronger business relations between the two parties. Since its establishment, the Ghana Stock Exchange has only one gold-backed equity trading, despite the country being the leading producer of gold in Africa. Speaking at a short ceremony to sign an MOU, CEO of the Minerals Income and Investment Fund, Edward Nanaya Kranting, told journalists that Ghana will be emulating other best practices in developing key sectors with funds from gold.
We want to be able to get them listed on the alternative exchange and help them even develop onto the main exchange. One reference point I usually make is Perth and Toronto. You look at Perth, you look at Toronto, these cities have been developed on the back of the mining sector. You look at Toronto, 1,500 out of the 3,500 listed companies are mining companies. And that's a $4.3 trillion market cap for that stock exchange. It's simple. Why can't we create the same here?
Managing Director of the Ghana Stock Exchange, Abnamwa, described the partnership as timely.
You know, there are certain things that requires policy to take the lead. And that's why we're very excited when the Minerals Commission in 2020-2021 launched the localization policy for the mining sector. Under that policy, mining companies of a certain size are required to list at least 20% of their shares on the stock exchange. And so this is an opportune time for us. It's in implementing this, and of course now there's MIF as well, with a very focused agenda to ensure that Ghana's mineral resources are developed in a manner that inures more to our benefit as well, equally to the benefit of Ghanaians. And that is why these stars are aligned.
The Ghana Stock Exchange, among other things, will make available its platforms for companies working with the Minerals Income and Investment Fund to access capital from any of the Ghana Stock Exchange markets.
While longer in the mining industry and mining firms, Goldfields and Anglo Gold Ashanti have ruled out job cuts despite plans to merge the Takwa and Eduaprim mines. Now, the two mining giants earlier this month announced they are merging these two mines to create the largest gold mine in Africa, subject to regulatory approval. Here's more.
The proposed joint venture is expected to improve the life of mine, ensure business efficiency and operational synergy through combining respective ore bodies and infrastructure for benefit of shareholders and stakeholders. Executive Vice President of Goldfields Ghana and head of its West African region, Joshua Montoti, noted this is subject to getting the approval from all the markets it operates.
The proposed joint venture is subject to the conclusion of due diligence and definitive transaction agreements and the requisite regulatory approvals. Goldfields and Anglo Gold Ashanti have worked collaboratively across a broad and comprehensive range of work streams to formulate the indicative base case for combining the two operations. Detailed work will be undertaken to develop the optimized initial operating plan that will apply from the start of the joint venture.
On his part, Managing Director of Anglo Gold Ashanti Ghana Limited, Eric Isubontin, said the joint venture will create longer-term value for combined stakeholders.
It's not in cutting costs as it has to do with employment. There are signages that brings the two, what is essentially all bodies together, and to be able to mine it efficiently. So that is what delivers the value, not so much in job cuts. So we don't see any major impact on employment. There would be some potentially very few job impacts on certain jobs or changes to certain roles, but even then, we will be looking at opportunities to see if those people that are impacted can be redeployed in other areas of the business. And if that can't happen, then we would commit to fair compensation. But that would be very few, as Joshua has already mentioned. And in all that, you can be sure that we will be very transparent in communicating with our employees and the people that get impacted, and following Ghana's law on labor, as well as the collective agreements that we have with the relevant unions.
Goldfields Ghana will have an interest of 66.7%, or two-thirds, while Anglo Gold Ashanti's interest will be 30%, with government having 10%.
Away from the mining industry, the draft procurement bill designed to regulate practice of procurement by the Ghana Institute of Procurement and Supply has been concluded and ready for stakeholder engagement. Now, to this end, the Institute is seeking the support of auditing firm KPMG to fast-track processes to get the bill ready for stakeholders. President of the Institute of Procurement and Supply, Simon Annan, has been speaking to Joy Business after signing an MOU with KPMG here in Accra. Here's more.
Expected to be laid in Parliament after the stakeholder engagement is concluded and inputs are considered. According to the Institute, collaborating with firms like the KPMG will be an added advantage. President of the Ghana Institute of Procurement and Supply, Simon Annan, told Joy Business that the decision to sign the MOU with KPMG couldn't have come at a better time.
To help us push through our bill that is being worked on. We have drafted a bill and we are doing a stakeholder, so this is also an opportunity to engage the stakeholders who are involved in the running of affairs in the country. When I say running of affairs, we are talking about people who are more concerned about what we spend in the country. And the purpose of it is for us to ensure that when procurement is done properly, the work of audit actually minimizes. And if we have a relationship with KPMG who are going to help us to pass our bill, or support us to pass our bill, then what it means is that that collaboration is also going to bring value to the profession and then Ghana at large.
Head of Advisory at KPMG, Andy Akoto, assured that all the necessary input will be made to enhance the bill.
One of our first points of assistance was to look at that bill, then to see how we can also bring our own views or inputs to make it even more effective in achieving the aims of GIPS. Effectively, we are going to be knowledge, research, and technical partners to help build capacity, collaborate on programs, and overall help in bringing more professionalism to the growth of the procurement function.
The Ghana Institute of Procurement and Supply is made up of procurement and supply practitioners in the country.
Now, tell you what, there is a huge financial deficit in Ghana's carbon market which needs to be addressed. These are the assertions of Director in charge of Climate Forestry at the Forestry Commission, Rosalind Eji. According to her, the World Bank's Forest Carbon Partnership Facility of $5 million paid for reducing carbon emissions is inadequate. Now, speaking to Joy Business at a carbon market roundtable discussion organized by the British High Commission, she asked government and various private sector players to support the development of carbon market here in Ghana.
Ghana became the second country in Africa after Mozambique to receive payment from the World Bank Trust Fund for reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation earlier this year. According to Rosalyn Ejay, Ghana can meet its national emissions reduction commitment under the Paris Agreement through private-public partnership.
The whole program is valued at this is some years, but currently it will change. About 300 million US dollars. We are receiving only 50 million US dollars in carbon payments. And as I mentioned, the price that we negotiated was just $5. Assuming we had done $10, that was going to give us 100 million. Even with that, it will still not be commensurate with the whole program valuation. However, we have support from private sector. As you know, Ghana's cocoa beans account for the global production at about 40% of what is on the global market. So that already has a lot of private sector, has entry points for private sector to engage. And that has been our sort of reserve where we fall onto. But there's a huge deficit. There's a lot more that we can do. There's a lot more government itself also must do. We can't just dwell on what private sector will do, on what donors will do. As a country, can we get into evaluation of our natural capital and to understand what sort of assets we have and what we can do with them? And that valuation should not just be mineral resources. That's what we normally tend to do. It's about gold, it's about oil, but the trees are also a very important aspect of our natural resources.
On this part, Deputy Director of Development at the Foundation for Climate Protection and Carbon Offset, Richardson Sandal, says the UK is working through international fora to set the foundations for a credible new global carbon trading system rooted in environmental integrity.
The crisis is real, it's urgent, and it's present here in Ghana. We've got problems of deforestation, and more people in Ghana are facing risks from climate change, and the cost of adaptation, of adapting to these problems, is really very high. Carbon credits is one part of the solution. A carbon credit is paid when an investment into growing trees or to reducing carbon emissions from cook stoves or investing in energy efficiency, when we can prove that we're taking carbon out of the air or preventing carbon emissions, then that can earn a carbon credit. And this market has been around for 20 years or even longer, but it's not worked very well. Now, COP26 in Glasgow a couple of years ago, were able to take forward the regulations to help govern the carbon markets and help fix some of the problems that have sort of bedeviled it and stopped it from taking off.
The new framework has seen major businesses developing their plans to invest carbon offset finance in Ghana.
You're still watching Business Live, and still to come up ahead. High inflation rate forces the Bank of Ghana to increase policy rate by more than 1% to 29.5%. We will hear from Governor Dr. Ernest Addison.
The Bank of Ghana will continue to monitor these developments going forward and stands ready to act very swiftly to safeguard the stability of the financial sector.
Welcome back to Business Live, to one of our headline stories. And the high rate of inflation has put some extra pressure on the Bank of Ghana to hike the policy rate for the second time this year. Well, it raised the rate at which it lends to commercial banks to 29.5%. My colleague George Yafe has more.
The governor noted that the Bank of Ghana wanted to take the necessary measures to help bring inflation rate to appreciable levels by the end of this year, hence the decision to hike the rate again by this margin.
The Bank of Ghana will continue to monitor these developments going forward and stands ready to act very swiftly to safeguard the stability of the financial sector. Growth. Headline inflation has declined marginally for 2 consecutive months, but continues to remain relatively high compared to the medium-term target of 8 plus or minus 2%. To place the economy firmly on the path of stability and reinforce the pace of disinflation, it is important that the monetary policy stance be tuned further to re-anchor inflation expectations.
In the IMF program approval by the board, this is what the governor had to say.
Fortunately, there is progress on that front. The official creditors committee met last week. They are looking at a date in April by which time they expect to give the necessary financial assurances. And once that is out of the way, once we have signed this memorandum of understanding, once Parliament has passed these new revenue measures, we would have completed what they call the prior actions. This is what is needed for the fund to set a date for the executive board meeting. So hopefully, if things go as planned, by the end of April, we should see that executive board meeting.
The governor of the Bank of Ghana also rejected argument that the central bank did indeed print cash to finance government of Ghana's budget deficit for last year.
Bank of Ghana's forecast for currency printing does not include, government financing needs. We make an estimate of the GDP for the year. A major factor in that is the cocoa production forecast. So that is what goes into, forecasting currency printing requirements. If you go to the bank's office on Spintex Road, we have a currency processing center there. We have vaults full of CDs. So we don't need to print money. We already have cash sitting in our vaults, and release these resources as and when the economy demands them. So that, impression that Bank of Ghana prints money to finance overdraft is completely wrong.
Dr. Addison also assured that the regulator is taking the necessary measures that will help stabilize the banking sector, as he rules out that any bank getting into the red zone as a result of this action.
The data that we have seen so far, I'm not sure what that means in terms of insolvency of banks. There are banks that have been impacted on. The capital adequacy ratios that I've seen, some of them have declined. I'm not sure if any banks have been driven into insolvency.
The Bank of Ghana is also giving the firm indication that it will be going ahead to strictly implement the zero financing of government budgets. The committee also decided to reset the cash reserve ratio on domestic currency deposits for banks from 12% to 14%, effective 13th April 2023. The governor noted that it stands ready to take additional liquidity management operations to address excess liquidity conditions in the market.
Part of the design of the macro framework going into 2023 and in the medium term would be the zero financing from the central bank. And that is why it's important that the revenue projections for 2023 and beyond are realized.
Governor Ernest Addison speaking there. But it is important we have to speak to the businesses. And this time round, we are engaging the Association of Ghana Industries Greater Accra Regional Chairman Chonam Afelu for his perspective on this. Grateful you could join us, Mr. Afelu. Now, I'm pretty sure your expectation was that you will see a reduction or better, if for anything at all, a maintenance. But here we are, 29.5. Your initial reaction.
Thank you, and good evening for your listeners. So I'd like to begin by saying that we're not entirely excited about the announcement by the Central Bank Governor. We realized that for some time now, the Central Bank has been engaged in inflation targeting by focusing on increasing the policy rate as a measure for targeting inflation. But by now, we should have realized that that approach is not working because inflation is still as high. And all of this time, there have been significant increments in the policy with the hope that inflation will go down, but it's not going down. The point is that the assumption that there's excess liquidity in the system, for which reason an increase in policy rate will help to deal with that. That assumption is clearly not holding water. And there are unintended consequences of this policy intervention, which is that now loanable funds to industry are continually being high. And as a result, most of our members are unable to afford the high rate of cost of borrowing. And this is making industry struggle to have access to the needed financing they need to expand our production capabilities. And so our view is that this is unfortunate. We really wish that the Central Bank would have listened to our plight and actually consider, if not for anything at all, to maintain it. But to continue to increase the policy rate, we feel that we are really not being taken into consideration in some of these decisions.
It appears your woes are going to deepen further, having in mind.
Exactly the case. Exactly the case. In fact, in the sub-region, Ghana remains one of the countries with the highest lending rate. It's not good enough. It's not good. I mean, in the era of continental free trade agreement, where we're expected to be competitive, I mean, competing with companies across the sub-region, and then you wake up and just witness an increase in policy rates, which of course would translate into increase in lending rates. That is really not giving good signal to industry.
I want to know, for the sake of time, I want to know what you're going to do now, because as it stands now, you have no option than to, borrow. If not, of course, you can't borrow directly from the Bank of Ghana, but of course, borrow from the various commercial banks, which of course will increase your lending rate. Now, it appears your lending rate is going to increase. So what are you going to do in the interim to, cushion your members, or better still, strategize during these times?
Well, for us, we will be meeting soon to discuss the way forward. But on top of my head, I'm very clear that we will have to appeal to the commercial banks not to increase their lending rate. It really has to be a moral situation now, because the rates are already high. And the commercial banks know that if they continue to increase it, nobody will come for loan because they're already high. And at that rate, if you borrow money, you cannot guarantee profitability of your business. And so in effect, the businesses are being crowded out. So we will be appealing to the commercial banks in a big way, and also really engage the central bank so that in the future they consider some of these things. We just feel that we're not being heard, and that's not a good thing. I mean, because we've been really as we are aware, we've really been on this journey of asking them to consider to reduce the policy rate. But it appears that, we're not getting, and they are not demonstrating to us the result of the increment of policy rate. I mean, if we're seeing inflation in single digits, then we know it's achieving results. But inflation is in the excess of the 50%. And that's the point. And we're saying that at that rate, clearly the increasing policy rate is not achieving the desired result. Obviously, something ought to be changed. Something different must happen, which is that reduce the policy rate. Let there be money, cheaper money for businesses, so that we can employ the many young people who are unemployed and really deal with the situation of unemployment in the country.
I guess your cost of production is likely to be affected in a minute.
In a big way. Already, the entire economic, macroeconomic environment for businesses are very high. The cost of production is really high. Look at the cost of power, cost of water. All of them has gone up. And every day, because of the exchange rate situation, the costs are going up because you are unable to plan anything in the boardroom because the exchange rate is fluctuating. At the same time, the cost of borrowing is already high. So to wake up to hear another announcement of having the policy rate going up, which in effect to make sure that the lending rate goes up, is really discouraging to say the least. And we really wish that the central bank take a second look at some of these decisions.
All right. Thank you very much, Shona Mafelu, for your time here on Business Live. He is the Greater Accra Regional Chairman of the Association of Ghana Industries, speaking to us on the back of the hike in the policy rate by some 29.5%. And that's it for Business Live for tonight. I am Pious Kojo Backah. Always a pleasure serving you. For more business stories, you can get them on myjoyonline.com/business. Always a joy serving you. Bye-bye.